Will I ever be as good at this as the Portuguese? Probably not. One wrong turn or missed lane change can easily add an extra hour to your trip. To me, there are two ways to spot a foreigner behind the wheel in Portugal, and one way to spot a foreigner crossing the street. The way roundabouts work in Portugal made no sense to me. Newcomers almost always get it wrong. At first, it feels like everyone's cutting you off, but no, they're just following the rules. Another thing that's really specific to Portugal, when you're driving, you sometimes will come across really slow moving cars. When we first moved here, we had no idea that Portugal's road fatality rate is above the EU average. Is it really that bad? So Portuguese driving rules have its own logic. Roundabouts and highways work differently here. Portugal was the first country to let you drive through the tolls without stopping. As a pedestrian in Portugal, you need to get used to a more respectful way of crossing for your own safety. Now, a quick word about exchanging your foreign driver's license for a Portuguese license. Bottom line is, the rules just got tougher. So you're thinking of moving to Portugal, or maybe you already live here, but the idea of driving here absolutely terrifies you. So how do you ever get used to it? My mother came to visit a couple of months ago, and she simply refused to drive here. Because here's the truth. If you're coming from a place like the US, driving in Portugal can feel downright intimidating. And your brain knows it the second you hit the road. So how do Portuguese do it? How do they stay so calm and confident? And can you ever adapt to that? And why is driving here so different from the US? So, what's actually going to shock you once you're here in Portugal in a driver's seat? Yes, there are different rules and different driving culture, but I'm not here to give you a lesson on the traffic laws, although I will definitely cover some of that. Instead, the point of this video is to give you a real picture of what it actually feels like to drive here, based on my own experience, and to share some tips you only learn once you spend time behind the wheel in Portugal. I'm also going to touch on a few important law changes that came out this year, because those will affect everyone driving here. For example, when I first came to Portugal 5 years ago, roundabouts absolutely terrified me. The way roundabouts work in Portugal made no sense to me. And it took me a long time to make an internal shift and to get to the point where it started to feel okay. The thing is, once you learn rules that are new to you, process them, and accept them as your new reality, suddenly everything starts to click. So let's get rolling. I'll start with the obvious. Something everyone thinks about when it comes to driving in Portugal: speeding and road fatalities. When we first moved here, we had no idea that Portugal's road fatality rate is above the EU average. Is it really that bad? Well, it depends on what you compare it with. I can only speak from my own experience coming from the US, where I lived for 25 years. Driving in DC and surrounding metropolitan area isn't much safer. People also tend to speed on highways, just like here in Portugal. Now, is speeding in Portugal a serious issue? Absolutely. Portugal only ranks slightly better than countries like Bulgaria, Romania, and Latvia. The good news is that this year there have been some significant changes to the law, which is crucial for tackling this problem. And I'll break down those changes in a minute. First thing to know, of course, is that we're in Europe, so it's kilometers here, not miles. The speed limit here is 120 kilometers per hour on highways. And from what I've seen, it's not enforced as strictly as in countries like France or Switzerland, for example. But generally, in my opinion, Portuguese drivers are quite respectful of the highways. Here's a fun fact for you. Portugal was the first country to let you drive through the tolls without stopping. It's called Via Verde here, and it was launched back in 1991. You just drive through, a little tag on your windshield takes care of the payment, so no stopping and no waiting. Think about that. Portugal invented a system that's now used all over the world and changed the way toll roads work everywhere. Another thing that's really specific to Portugal, when you're driving, you sometimes will come across really slow moving cars. It's totally normal here because there are a lot of elderly drivers in Portugal. People normally treat them with respect and patience. It's part of the culture. Portugal treats older people with care, and it shows on the road too. So just know it's a norm here, and that's a good thing. Now I want to move to some fun observations that I made while living here. They're almost entertaining, but actually really good to know. So pay attention, because there are a few things that you need to be aware of, both as a driver and as a pedestrian, if you're moving to Portugal. To me, there are two ways to spot a foreigner behind the wheel in Portugal, and one way to spot a foreigner crossing the street. I've been there myself, so I get it. Let's start with driving. First is roundabouts. Newcomers almost always get it wrong. So if you're coming from the US, here's the difference. Picture a two-lane road in each direction. As you approach the roundabout, get into the right lane only if you plan to take the first exit. If not, you must stay in the left lane. So you enter the roundabout in the left lane, ride along, and when it's time to exit, you move right. At first, it feels like everyone's cutting you off, but no, they're just following the rules. And just like in the US, cars already inside the roundabout have priority. Honestly, it took me a long time to wrap my head around this. Now, after living here for 5 years, I'm finally making peace with it, and I'm sure you will too. Moving on to highways. And here's one thing you absolutely need to know. The left lane is only for passing. You don't just cruise there like in the US. That's a no-go. Don't make this mistake. Stay out of the left lane unless you're using it to pass another car. So Portuguese driving rules have its own logic. Roundabouts and highways work differently here, but once you get it, it starts to make sense. Now here's the third very important tip. As pedestrians in the US, we're spoiled. Cars will just automatically stop and wait for you to cross. Don't expect that to happen here in Portugal. As a pedestrian in Portugal, you need to get used to a more respectful way of crossing for your own safety. One important tip here: use crosswalks. There are plenty in the city, and it's the fastest, easiest, and the safest way to cross. Most of the time, when you're ready to cross, cars will stop and let you pass. But I strongly suggest to stop and make sure that the driver can see you. Sometimes they brake sharply, but they almost always stop. Portuguese do respect road crossings, not only because there is a hefty fine, but mostly because of their culture. Even if a driver accidentally doesn't stop on time for a pedestrian, they usually feel upset and apologetic when it happens. And one more quick tip here. The same patience you see with pedestrians doesn't always apply when you're backing out of a parking space. You just need to be extra careful here. Watch your mirrors, go slowly, and make sure the way is clear before you move. Now, a quick word about exchanging your foreign driver's license for a Portuguese license. The rules here depend on where you come from. For Americans, for example, if you're a tourist, non-resident, you can drive up to 185 days, basically 6 months, with a valid US license. However, once you become a Portuguese resident, you have 90 days to submit your exchange application online. During this process, you can drive legally using your US license with a temporary permit from IMT. The entire exchange process must be completed within 2 years. Otherwise, you will have to pass a practical driving test to obtain a Portuguese license. I suggest getting your license exchange sorted out sooner rather than later. Stuff like this can drag forever in Portugal. And if you're looking for a guide that includes instructions on all that, I put together Moving to Portugal Handbook, which you can grab from the description below. It's got everything you need to actually plan and complete your move. 14 chapters, 42 pages, covering visas, housing, healthcare, all the paperwork, and even how to deal with the emotional roller coaster of moving abroad. There are checklists, resources, with all the websites and contact information, all step by step. Basically, the exact roadmap that I wish we had when we made the move. It will save you a ton of time and money, and it's all based on what we really went through, not just some generic internet advice. Plus, I also have a D7 visa guide, a checklist that we personally use to get approved, updated with all the current requirements. And it also covers in detail all your options for getting Portuguese NIF and opening a bank account. Check it out, it might just be the solution you're looking for. Now let's move on to a few more things to know about driving in Portugal. Let's touch on something you've probably already heard. The roads here can be really narrow in some places, and there are also a lot of one-way streets to navigate. Because of that, having a big car once you move to Portugal may not be the best idea. And yes, another one is the underground garage spaces. Some of them are under big shopping malls or under shopping plazas or apartment buildings. And let me tell you, they're not for the faint of heart. Honestly, I don't know a single foreigner who hasn't at least once brushed their car against a wall in one of these. There's just not enough space. And with all the curves, corners, and spirals, yeah, it's just tricky. Will I ever be as good at this as the Portuguese? Probably not. They're still terrifying to me, even after 5 years. But hey, it's just one more thing for me to learn here in Portugal, and I have hope I'll get it eventually. And I can't forget about the size of the parking spaces. They're so tiny compared to what we're used to in the US. At first, it's tricky, but you learn to adapt and figure out the angles. And eventually, you develop a whole new parking skill. It's a bit of a challenge, but eventually you get there. And now I just want to add a quick note about paying attention to crosswalks while driving. Back in the US, we lived in the suburbs around DC, where once you leave your neighborhood, there are hardly any crosswalks. So we never really developed the skill of constantly watching for pedestrians. Here in the city, it's a whole different story. Crosswalks are everywhere, almost on every corner, and at the entrance and exits of each roundabout. It took us a while to get used to, and honestly, it can be a little dangerous at first, because some people will just step out without looking. My big tip here is to be aware, especially if you're not used to driving with so many crosswalks around, and stay consciously alert for pedestrians at all times. Truth is, I still struggle with certain situations on the road here, even after 5 years. The trickiest for me are the super narrow streets in some of the older villages, as well as the winding roads in the mountains with breathtaking views around. But also Lisbon itself. Just like any capital city, it takes time to learn your way around. One wrong turn or missed lane change can easily add an extra hour to your trip. But hey, I'm getting better. Now here's a quick heads up on Portugal's updated driving laws for 2025. If you're new here or have been driving for a while, these are the changes you need to know about. For example, fines for speeding, drunk driving, and using your phone behind the wheel just got a lot tougher, so don't even risk it. The minimum speed on highways went up, so driving too slow can also get you in trouble. There are stricter rules now for seatbelts and child safety seats. If you need to stop on the side of the road, carrying and using reflective vest and warning triangle is mandatory. Also, cyclists and electric scooters have new protections and rules, like minimum overtaking distances, helmet requirements, and where they can ride. Bottom line is, the rules just got tougher and smarter to keep everyone safer on the road and to provide more protection for pedestrians. I hope this was useful and gave you some real life tips for driving in Portugal.
And speaking about adapting to life here, the next video is all about something you'll run into every single day: how to order coffee.
Trust me, it's a lot more complicated than you may think.
I'll break down 10 basic ways to order coffee in Portugal, because if you don't order it right, you'll end up with a drink you didn't want. Once that video is ready, you can click right here to watch it.